We unfortunately worked with a very bad host who had no intention of providing the kind of service that we were looking for. Nothing got online in time. Everything was broken. We were getting all sorts of fees and bills. And so this was a devastating loss
Yeah.
at the time, like huge amount of money to lose, especially when you're thinking about planning a wedding with the person you're going to spend your life with. But then in 2020, we decided that Dallas Fort Worth wasn't the place for us long term. I was really yearning for the mountains, nature, the ability to be outside. And so my wife and I now, she was my girlfriend at the time, packed up our stuff, put it in a shipping container, sent it up to Washington, and then just took a road trip going from Texas to the West Coast and stopping all along the way, seeing if we would find somewhere that we wanted to set down some roots. So I had the benefit of having enough pieces of content come into my life to really re-examine what is the safest way that I can store and grow wealth over the next 40 years that's different from the last 40 years. And when I had been looking at the lens of the last 40 years, the answer to me was real estate. Gold has value in part because it is scarce and it takes energy to, we're not going to say create, but refine, prospect, find, and turn into something that we use as a form of money. So the energy and the infrastructure and expenditure that it takes to create gold is part of why it's valuable. It's part of why it's hard to fake. And that is part of what gives it its monetary premium.
Did you know there's a technology that's actually an app on your phone that uses sound waves to tell your brain what you want your brain to do? We had a young man that was on a guest on our podcast, the Mike Litton Experience, who had a traumatic brain injury. He was sleeping 3 hours a night. He's using NewCalm now and he's sleeping more. Go to newcalm.com, Mike15 promo code. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience podcast. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. Mike is passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
Beau Turner, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. And like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go up to today, and then we want to talk about these amazing things that you're doing with crypto. Thanks for being here, bud.
That sounds great. And thank you so much for having me, Mike.
So where were you born?
I was originally born in Birmingham, Alabama.
Yeah. Did you grow up there?
I grew up there, and until I was 18, lived there my whole life.
Cool. What was your favorite thing about growing up in Birmingham?
The pace of life was, I think, just right.
Yeah.
It wasn't a huge city. It wasn't an overly dangerous place, although there are parts of Birmingham that have made some of the top 10 lists that you don't want to be on.
Yeah.
What I really enjoyed was the sense of community that I had. I felt like I was always, even though I was in a million plus metro, around friends, and never felt like I was overwhelmed as you would be in a place like New York.
That's cool, man. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
I would say my father,
Yeah.
for sure.
Why?
Both of my parents were entrepreneurs, and so I really didn't have anything other than that as a template for what looked like success when you're growing up. And they ran the company together, which was, another imprint that I've definitely actualized in my own life, getting a chance to work with my wife. And I just saw that as natural, normal and natural, that your parents work together, they love each other very much, and that they build something meaningful together. And so the idea of people going to separate offices or somebody staying home was not something that I was exposed to. It was very much a collaborative, both building together kind of effort.
What kind of company, what kind of business were they in?
They built a legal services company. So it started out as just court reporting, the people who are on the stenograph machines taking notes on what everybody's saying, and then built it out to just full service legal support.
Ever just fascinate you how court reporters do that?
It looks like it looks like they're connecting into something.
Yeah.
They're just kind of allowing their body to run.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm not an especially gifted typist. I had no inclination to go into that line of work. I had no interest in taking over the family business, so to speak. But it did always amaze me watching them do it or practice doing it. And it just, it looked like they were casting some sort of spell on this machine.
Yeah. And it's amazing how accurate they are. I mean, it just blows my mind. And they're doing their thing, and it's like, wow. I mean, I get it. You get better with practice and all that kind of stuff, but every time I've ever been like on a jury or, in a courtroom and that kind of thing, and there's a court reporter there, it just amazes me. It looks like magic almost, it's just
And
wild.
they have to be such active listeners, right? So
Yeah.
they're constantly tuned in, they're tapped in, they're present. I never knew my parents to be people who were distracted. They were always very involved in whatever was going on around them. And I think that to some degree that has to do with them needing to be physically engaged in any conversation that's happening around them on a daily basis.
Well, and aware, like they have to be like you're saying, there's, objection, there's this, there's that, there's all this stuff going on and especially when it gets heated, people start talking faster and they're more emotional and they're, right. And they have to keep up, man. They have to, they can't very well go, okay, wait. Can you go back and, you know what I mean? It's wild. Anyway, yeah, I've always been amazed by them and had a huge amount of respect for them. Really kind of an art. So in high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Definitely physics.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed because it felt so intuitive to me.
Yeah.
It's like this is just how the world works.
It's
This isn't
natural,
about
right? Yeah.
concepts or memorization. This is just a reflection of reality. And that really, really mapped to the way that I wanted to be able to interact with the world and something that I could see myself engaging in.
That's a subject I enjoyed too. Did you have a favorite teacher in high school?
Um, actually my history teacher, who's also our soccer coach, was probably my favorite. He coincidentally lived just down the street. So, occasionally I'd ride my bike down and pester him, and that was a fun pastime. But I feel like more than anybody else, connected with his students on a human level. It didn't feel like you were in his class. It felt like you were just hanging out in his room. Although sometimes I was hanging out outside the room because I might have been a troublemaker every now and then.
Might have. It's never been proven, right? Nobody ever, right?
As the
don't
legal
believe all the
services
rumors
industry.
you hear, right?
Yeah. We're in the legal field. Allegedly, I was
Right,
outside of the
allegedly, right?
classroom.
Your innocence will prove guilty, baby. Just ask your parents; they'll tell you. So, so after high school, where do you go?
After high school, I moved out to Texas to go to engineering school at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Fort Worth.
Wow, SMU. Are you enjoying watching their football program?
You know, uh, I get often asked about football, having grown up in the South,
Yeah.
and I really didn't pay that much attention to it.
Oh, really?
Most attention
just-
I paid to it was having a fraternity brother who was on the team and being good buddies.
They just had a major upset the other day. They took down a nationally ranked team and they sort of came out of nowhere and everybody's like, the program, obviously I'm a huge college football fan, but everybody's saying, hey, the program's getting better, and then all of a sudden, right? And it's like, wow, it was a breakthrough. It was a big deal. So,
That's
and a
awesome.
lot of the people that I talked to that have gone to SMU, their football program wasn't so hot for a long time, and
No, I mean,
they're
completely destroyed.
it's starting to get back, right? And they're kind of enjoying it. So that's why I asked. So I didn't realize you weren't a football fan, but so you go to school at SMU, and your major was engineering.
I was a engineering management and information systems major.
Beautiful. What was your favorite thing about attending SMU?
I think it's that I found there my drive to build something myself. And it wasn't necessarily, I mean, I took entrepreneurship courses, but it was really more of rebellious or a resistive kind of reaction, where I felt that I was being pushed toward a path of, engineering for somebody else's company, doing consulting, a path that I didn't really want to be on.
Yeah.
And as much as I valued the information, the curriculum, and the skills that it was helping me build, I couldn't imagine myself helping somebody else build something of theirs. If I were going to give my all to something, it was going to be to build my own business. And so
Kind of going back to what you'd experienced as normal growing up.
right. I really looked up to the fact that my parents had so much freedom and could build something themselves. And I know that there is this instinct in a parent to make sure that their kids have a safe and reliable path. And that was definitely imposed upon me to make sure, hey, you probably philosophy degree, not going to fly with us. It's gotta be something that's going to lead to a tangible career,
Did you
regardless.
float that?
That was what I was interested in. I thought
Oh, I
that would be the
love it.
most fun.
I love it. Why were you interested in a degree in philosophy or a philosophy major?
I just really enjoy unpacking how people think.
Yeah.
And, I've been into personal development for a long time and always tended toward reading those sorts of books that unpack psychology, behavior, why people act the way that they do. And I thought that philosophy was the most natural way for me to get that in the form of a degree. I'm glad looking in hindsight that that wasn't the way that it worked out, because I wouldn't have had the skill set that I needed to build the company that I have now. But at the time, that was what genuinely called to me. And I was pretty upset with them when they didn't want to let me pursue that path.
It's an age thing, but it's also one of those things where you're sort of spreading your wings and trying to be independent and right. Do you have a favorite philosopher?
Oh, that's a great question. He's not I wouldn't call him a philosopher necessarily. I don't think he would call himself a philosopher either, but I really appreciate the way that Jim Rohn showed up in life. So Jim Rohn many people would know him as the person who inspired Tony Robbins, since Tony Robbins
Guy who hired him.
Right.
Yeah.
And he, to me, just had such a grounded and powerful way of interacting with the world that, especially in my younger years, was very influential. And I didn't know it until years later, but many of the people who I grew to love and respect as leaders and mentors through either their books or their teachings or talking were influenced by Jim. And so, going as upstream as possible, I would say he would be the one that I would point to as a favorite philosopher.
He really was. I mean, nobody gives him credit for it. But if you look at his body of work, and it's extensive, right? But if you look at his body of work and the life that he lived, he really was a modern day philosopher. I mean, I know he's not labeled that and all that kind of thing, but I could not respect him more if I tried. No way.
I think it's the respect for applied philosophy, not just, being a great writer or having compelling ideas, but really putting them into action in the world.
Yeah.
And that is what's inspiring to me, is when an idea can be applied so directly by somebody to make a change in their lives or the lives of people around them that it ripples out. That's what really is more exciting to me than a PhD thesis that, 4 to 5 people might read.
I gotcha. So after college, where do you go?
After college, I stay in Dallas for a few years building a real estate company. So we have, my parents were in legal services, but they also tended toward real estate and hard assets, alternative assets. So I took a few weekend courses, what we call driving for dollars, going around finding rundown properties.
You were a wholesaler.
I was a wholesaler before I ever made it to college.
Wow.
And so right out of college, I mentioned I had no interest in getting a job at an engineering firm or a consulting firm. Really just started driving for dollars around Dallas, Fort Worth, and got the first deal within a couple months. I was hooked. I realized that I could actually make a business myself and run a business myself. And we did, somewhere on the order of 100 deals over the course of a few years, wholesaling, fix and flipping, all sorts of creative financing. and really just over the course of a few years built a company and a portfolio that made me at least have the ability to be a relatively early retiree. Um, but then in 2020, we decided that Dallas Fort Worth wasn't the place for us long term. I was really yearning for the mountains, nature, the ability to be outside. And so my wife and I now, she was my girlfriend at the time, packed up our stuff, put it in a shipping container, sent it up to Washington, and then just took a road trip going from Texas to the West Coast and stopping all along the way, seeing if we would find somewhere that we wanted to set down some roots. And along the way, we found Central Oregon and absolutely fell in love.
How could you not? It's one of the prettiest places on the planet. It really is.
I grew up, I've probably seen the Lord of the Rings movies a couple hundred times a piece. And I like to think of Central Oregon and just Oregon itself as kind of our real life version of Middle Earth. I look outside my office window and I see, a standing mountain out in the middle of the desert, and it looks just like the Lonely Mountain in the Lord of the Rings series. And that is really what I enjoy is getting the sense that I wake up kind of in a fairy tale land and get to build and live and explore and really live in a sort of reality that I think most people never get the privilege to have. And that's really been the blessing, is loving so much where I live and feeling so connected to a place like this that I never felt when it came to living in Dallas or living in Birmingham.
So you packed a container of your stuff and then went on a sort of a walkabout, right? You just kind of went touring and to see what you would find.
My wife and I were involved in, we were really diving down the path of meditation. And so we had just gotten out of a meditation retreat, and I give her credit where credit is due. She always sees what I see several months before I do, and just has to poke me, over and over again before I'll understand it. And she had been saying, I don't really know if this is the career that you're going to be in love with years from now. I don't know if this is the place that you want to be in years from now. Like, I don't really see us having a very long-term route here and business here. And I was like, no, I really love what I do. Real estate's fun. And it really just took a couple months of thinking and creating some space where we went to a retreat. And that helped me realize, you know what? I don't know what it's going to be. I don't have the path laid out in front of me so clearly that I can see exactly what it's going to be, but you're right. This isn't it. And so we just made the choice to disconnect, to cut bait, burn the bridge, as you may, and set off in a direction that felt more right than what we were looking at. And that turned out to be a good move.
That's so cool, man. What a great story. I love the fact that you just kind of didn't know where you were headed. So you're just kind of like, okay, let's just go find a place. Let's go find something that works, It's kind
I
of a
think
spiritual, it's kind of a spiritual journey.
all of the greatest things that I can point to that have happened in my life have happened at times where I released expectation, released an attachment to how I thought it should unfold, and just trusted that it was going to work out.
Wow.
And that was certainly an example of that. It's so easy for us to get comfortable, but comfort isn't necessarily fulfillment.
Yeah.
And I think that's been one of the biggest personal unlocks for me, is when I start to get too comfortable, I also notice that that meter starts to shift away from fulfillment.
Yeah.
And there's something just magical about living in the unknown.
Yeah.
It opens you up to all of the potential, all of the possibility that can unfold in your life. And until you make that space, there's nowhere for it to go. You don't leave an opening for anything unknown or divine to enter your life when you're trapped in comfort and have a fully filled routine and habit structure that you don't give any wiggle room to.
There's a t-shirt that people are wearing, and I just saw one the other day, and it's "Comfort is the enemy."
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, it's true. It's absolutely true. And you start looking at some of the like religions, right? Start looking at like, Buddhism, that kind of stuff, right? All of a sudden it's not, it's a lot of what you're talking about, right? You look at the four laws of that the Buddha, laid down. And it's a lot of what you're talking about where you don't have expectations. You just kind of let things happen and everything works out the way it's supposed to. It's kind of a cool way to live.
In a sense, it's like the peace that is really lasting and abounding is not found in the seeking of comfort. It's just a total acceptance of what is. And it
Right.
is not comfortable at all to just say, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't have any certainty or necessarily security about what I'm going to do next. But there is a sense of peace of just being okay with that and not needing it to be any different than it is, not needing it to be certain. That is really the superpower is just being able to accept uncertainty. And I think that's the entrepreneurial gene as well. They're willing to accept a higher degree of uncertainty and unknown than most people can stand. And there's a vast amount of reward, both materially and spiritually, for being able to stand in that discomfort.
Yeah, I agree. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this crypto company that you started and specifically what it is that you guys are doing to help people transform their lives. We'll be right back. Did you know there's an app that has no side effects that allows you to use sound waves to tell your brain what you want it to do? It's called newcalm.com and it's amazing. It literally uses sound waves. If you want to tell your brain to go to sleep, if you want to tell your brain to recover, if you want to tell your brain to put you in peak physical state, if you want to tell your brain to focus, if you want to tell your brain to take a power nap, you can do all of these things and more with newcalm.com. Go to newcalm.com today, promo code Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go there today. We're back with Beau Turner. And before the break, we were talking about a lot of things, but we were talking about meditation. We were talking about Buddhism. We were talking about, letting things go, right? And not having like huge expectations, that kind of thing. At some point, and you moved to Oregon, I think in 2020, is that right?
21.
21.
Yep.
So you've been there roughly 4 years. You're there now. And at some point you decided to look into investing in crypto. And specifically, you're helping people do that. Can you talk about that mindset for a second? What made you decide to go in that lane, so to speak? You've sort of been an investor all your life.
I've always had this inclination toward creating wealth and looking for the way that I could create outsized returns. And in some sense, it goes back to my parents' psychology, my grandparents' psychology. There's this through line of sound money.
Mhm.
So my grandparents were definitely gold bugs. And I remember being around 10 years old and seeing my first gold coin and being explained, what this is, why it matters. So that was very much a formative memory for me in terms of understanding what is wealth, what is money, what is currency. And in my early college years, I was first exposed to Bitcoin. And admittedly, I saw that it was cool. I saw that it was, maybe an interesting investment. I didn't really respect what it was on my first exposure, probably like many people who first see it, take a pass, don't necessarily act on it. I'm happy that I got some of it on my first exposure, and that was enough to keep me paying attention to it.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until several years later, that 2020 and 2021 period, that I was kind of edging out of loving real estate and looking for what was next. And again, credit to my wife, she knows what's good for me months, if not years before I do. Forwards me a newsletter and says, "Hey, I know you already have some of this, but I think maybe you should pay a little bit deeper attention to it." And so a great time to make big changes in your life is when you're already moving, you're changing your environment, you're changing the people around you, your habits. So it was just a period that I was open to looking at something different, looking at it differently. And what became clear to me, in 2020, we had the benefit of quite a bit more content and people who were studying this space and paying attention to it, who were serious investors versus like 2013 and 2015. I mean, it was mostly just people who were writing on the internet and not necessarily sophisticated or well-respected investors talking about this on CNBC. So I had the benefit of having enough pieces of content come into my life to really re-examine what is the safest way that I can store and grow wealth over the next 40 years that's different from the last 40 years.
Mhm.
And when I had been looking at the lens of the last 40 years, the answer to me was real estate.
Mhm.
But when I looked at the next 40 years, it was something digital.
Yeah.
And so I started buying Bitcoin. We started liquidating part of our real estate portfolio to buy Bitcoin. But I also had this attachment to cash flow. I mean, real estate is this really beautiful asset class because it cash flows, it appreciates, you've got a depreciation schedule. It's such a Swiss Army knife of wealth creation and preservation for many people in the world. I don't have to tell you that.
Yeah.
So I wanted something similar in the digital space. And what I found was mining, which is just the process of running these computers that create digital currency and take tons of energy to do so.
Mhm.
And that resonated with me because it was a way to accumulate an appreciating asset, do so with a cash flow stream, and with a physical asset that was making it. So you actually have this depreciating asset that you can write off against any income you create. So that resonated very heavily with me. Unfortunately, as we were getting into it very seriously, my wife and I had just gotten engaged, and we put about $500,000 into being customers of this hosting company. So you buy these servers, send them to somebody with the data center, they run them, you create the Bitcoin, they get their management fee, everybody's happy. And it didn't work out that way. We unfortunately worked with a very bad host who had no intention of providing the kind of service that we were looking for. Nothing got online in time, everything was broken, we were getting all sorts of fees and bills. And so this was a devastating loss at the time, like huge amount of money to lose, especially when you're thinking about planning a wedding with the person you're going to spend your life with.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want to give up on the industry. I didn't want to give up on the asset or the technology, but it was clear that we couldn't rely on people very much.
Yeah.
So we actually took that experience, kept liquidating our real estate portfolio, and took the proceeds to build our first data center here in Oregon. So we actually stood up a facility to solve that need for ourselves and, just feel safe in the ability to run these machines and know that they would be taken care of because it would actually be in our own facility. And along the way, we realized that there were other people just like us who wanted exposure to this space, who probably didn't have the engineering background and data center coursework that would make them a fit to go out and develop these kinds of facilities, but still wanted to participate. So we actually started making our own facilities available to other people who wanted to buy servers from us, run them with us, and collect that Bitcoin income.
Mhm.
And so that was the first one that we stood up. We took on our first outside clients that weren't ourselves in 2023. We are now up to 5 operating data centers around Oregon and building number 6 and 7 right now, with hundreds of people that work with us just to do exactly what we were looking to do ourselves, which was get a position in Bitcoin, get it in a tax advantaged way, and create a recurring income stream that's powered by renewable energy.
That's cool, man. That's cool. So you basically went ahead of everybody and figured out how not to do it, right? And then and then and then basically took what you learned, right? Kind of like I got declined for the first home loan I ever applied for. So I got my real estate license and got in the mortgage business. Right. And now I've done thousands and thousands and thousands of home loans in my career. No, no declines, right? All that kind of stuff. So I learned from working with somebody who was not the best in the world, right?
Yeah.
Right. To put it politically correct. And learned that, you know what, I can do this a lot better. So then you guys go out and you decide to take the lessons you've learned and turn it into a win, right? The idea of mining Bitcoin, let's be honest, is kind of intimidating to people
Mhm.
because they think, I just don't have the technical, wherewithal to do it, that kind of thing. But people can come to you and they can hire you to help them do it.
It's if you think of it like a full service property management firm
Yeah.
that has deal flow for you, that manages properties for you, that does all of the consulting and underwriting for you, that's essentially what we're doing in a
Yeah.
space that most people are not familiar with. And I like the way that you framed it. Uh, you know, the bad experiences, I would say, the kind way of framing it is you get to pay tuition, and you can either pay tuition by making your own mistakes or learning with somebody else who's already made them.
Mhm.
I also like to think that the purpose that we have, especially as entrepreneurs, is sitting right next to the worst things that ever happened to us in
Yeah.
life. And this was certainly one of the most painful periods that I've ever experienced as a man, as a business owner. Just going through that was so affronting to every sense that I had of being a good decision maker, being a good investor, being a good business owner. And it led me to really have essentially this crusade to
Mhm.
make sure that we lifted the tide of the entire industry with what we do. And I'm happy to say that at this point, we see a lot of companies that do similar things to us actually copying what we do
Mhm.
because we've taken the industry and so thoroughly flipped it on its head and changed the way that the business model works. And, you know, in the Wild West, you can do just about anything. But once somebody comes along and forms an institution that treats people right, you have no choice but to either conform and do better or leave and find another piece of low hanging fruit. So that's been extremely gratifying. But in a sense, I built this for myself several
Mhm.
years ago, and I was smart, capable, had plenty of background to do this right, but not the subject matter expertise and not the industry expertise to know what I didn't know. And so we built the service to satisfy that person who's otherwise, great business person, great investor, great entrepreneur, but does not have the subject matter expertise for this industry, and make sure that they can get into it in a done for you way that takes care of them in ways that they probably don't even know that they need to be taken care of.
Well, it's what you were looking for before when you hired that company. And, some of the best ways to learn is to fall flat on your face,
Hmm.
right? Skin your nose, whatever. And that's what you guys did. You went ahead of everybody and figured out a way to sort of like plug and play. So if somebody's listening to this and they're interested in working with you, like they see the value in mining Bitcoin, they just don't know how to do it. How does this go? Like, do they reach out to you, and what's the process, and how do you figure out if there's somebody you want to work with?
Of course. Well, I mean, the easiest way to find us, of course, is our website, which is abundantminds.com. We have essentially a totally done for you service model where people come to us. They see, like you said, the promise of the industry, the promise of the vehicle, but don't know what they don't know or how to get into it. And so we essentially take them from, I just have cash that I want to get a better return on, to having an operating machine. They would actually buy the equipment through us. We source it, set it up in our data centers, do all of the operations, the maintenance, labor, technical diagnostics, part swaps, whatever needs to happen for it to work out is happening because we're taking care of it.
Right.
So our clients are business owners, they're investors, family offices, small hedge funds, people who are not looking for another job. I mean, you're not hiring me as a consultant, you're not hiring my team as a consultant. It's truly a done for you service
Yeah.
with consulting added, because we recognize that in this industry there is so much misinformation. And frankly, most people, even very sophisticated investors, have little information or bad information about how many of these systems work. So, included in just the basic service is unlimited one to one consulting with our team so that you can not only be mining successfully, but keeping your funds safe, working through custody, working through your strategy, allocation, all of these things that usually you've got to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars an hour for people to look at with you, I feel like is table stakes for people to even seriously look at this industry. And so what I didn't appreciate when I first got into this, I thought everybody that I would work with who would, want to use this service that we've built was going to be kind of like me, young, tech forward, already have a reasonable understanding of the industry, already have been navigating the space. They just didn't take the initiative or have the capital to go build a full-on data center.
Right.
What I realized was actually most of our clients are 40 or older and may not have any familiarity. More than half of our clients are actually setting up their first wallet with us. So I've always been very passionate about educating and sharing knowledge with people. And so realized that it was actually a very valuable thing to offer, not just a service that kind of like done for you, make your income and have a great investment vehicle, but also the education that comes along with that. And so I think one of the most important things that we can do is not only give people a good vehicle, but make them better investors through the process of working with us. And I like to say that even with the best investment vehicles, if you don't understand them properly, you're not going to navigate that investment life cycle properly. So you might have Bitcoin that you bought at $1 and you see it go up to 50 and you sell. And when it goes up to $100,000, that's a huge loss because you heard something somewhere that this is as high as it'll ever go. Or maybe you even bought in at 69,000, watched it go down to 15 and you sold because you weren't mentally prepared for the swings of a market. And so much of the investing life cycle isn't getting things technically right. It isn't even picking the right thing. It's navigating the psychology of that investment right. And if I've seen one area where people navigate with worse psychology than any other part of the investment world, it is the crypto space. And there's just, you can't blame them because there's so much bad information. Hardly anybody gets their description of how any of this works right. And so I think it's, if nothing else, a public service. And we do a lot of this for free. You never have to work with us. You could get everything that's on our YouTube channel and learn a ton about the industry. But I feel like this is one of the biggest gaps in people getting comfortable with the space is having one, understanding, and two, somebody who's just in your corner who you can trust isn't going to lead you astray or get you into something speculative or overly risky. And I feel it as a responsibility personally, since a lot of the people that we work with, they're putting serious money into this. I mean, it's not a low ticket buy-in to get one of these machines. And many people have tens, if not hundreds of them with us. So they're looking at, multi 6-figure, multi 7-figure portfolios with us and expecting it not to get vaporized or mismanaged. And to the degree that I can equip them to be great investors in this space alongside providing a great service, I think we help them very holistically throughout their investing life.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, people fear what they don't know the most, right? But there's so much out there. Good, bad, ugly, inaccurate information that it's hard to know who you can trust and it's hard to know who your source should be, right? And so that's, I think, where you guys stand out is that you're that source. You're that place that people can go where they can get accurate information. So I have a question for you. I'm going to mess this up because I'm not the most crypto savvy person in the world. There's something about Bitcoin where it terminates doubling or something. I forget what it's called. Can you talk about that for a second? Isn't there a date where it stops?
Yeah. So I think you're referencing the halving.
There it is. Sorry, I said it wrong. I apologize.
No, you're great. So this is one of the fundamental reasons why Bitcoin is such an interesting asset is that it has a provably finite supply. So if
it's
you
got
think
a cap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So there's only ever going to be 21 million Bitcoin. And the reason that that's unique is that we've never had another asset that we could say there's never going to be more of. You can also
Exactly.
always technically make more of pretty much everything that people store their wealth in, whether you're thinking about real estate. Gold even has a 2 to 3% inflation rate every year. But Bitcoin is this first invention or discovery, if you will, of immutable scarcity. So we know with certainty, because it's enforced by code that's run on thousands of machines around the world. And essentially, unless you got every one of those people to act otherwise, which if you've paid any attention to human nature, it's hard to get them to cooperate on anything, especially if it's not in their interest. So without going too deep into the technical way that it's set up, Bitcoin is finite at 21 million coins total. And the issuance schedule is such that every 4 years, the amount of new Bitcoin that comes onto the market gets cut in half.
Gotcha.
So in the first 4 years that the network was active, every 10 minutes, miners would mine 50 Bitcoin. Every 4 years, that gets cut in half to the point that now in late 2025, we're at 3.125 Bitcoin that comes out every 10 minutes. And that will keep getting cut in half until the year 2140 when the last Bitcoin gets mined. And then there's no more to mine. But for anybody that isn't familiar with how miners make money, that's not the only way that we get Bitcoin. It's also by transaction fees. So miners are performing a service on the network to actually help people move value. If you think of like the Swift network or Visa, they get paid transaction fees to move value across that network. It's the exact same with Bitcoin miners. So even as the last Bitcoin gets mined, we still get paid on transaction fees and have a business model that works after 100 years into the future.
So after 2140.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Yeah, I didn't realize it was 115 years away. I didn't realize that. I apologize. That's kind of a dumb question, but it does have a finite supply, right? So it's like it's never going to be more than 21 million. So
Correct.
can you, for just a second, just because I'm annoyingly curious, can you walk us through the sort of layman's, right? Be simple. I'm in real estate. How does mining work?
Of course. And I want to highlight something you said. There's no dumb questions in something like this.
Yeah.
This is new technology. You weren't dumb for asking how TCP/IP worked in the 90s. It was a brand new foundation that very few people understood. And shame on the people who made someone feel bad for asking a question to try and understand emerging technology that could change the course of their lives. I mean, we're familiar with it now that people who paid attention and did the homework and studied and made the time to understand how the internet worked are some of the richest people walking the earth today and have built just absolutely monumental companies. And we're living through something like that again. And we have the benefit of hindsight with the internet. We don't have the benefit of hindsight with Bitcoin. You have to understand it in real time as it's happening. And it goes back to this education piece where if you don't understand it, it's a very reasonable thing to just say, I'm not going to get involved.
Yeah.
I mean, you've heard plenty of investors say, only invest in what you understand. Otherwise, you're taking undue risk because you have no idea if you have an edge, if you're just getting into somebody else's snake oil sales. So I agree with the premise that you shouldn't invest in things you don't understand, but I also think you should seek to understand more as your life goes on.
Yeah,
so
totally agree.
Just want to level set that for you, for anybody listening. There's no stupid questions in this space. You should ask and you should understand.
So I'm going to take issue with that. There's actually there shouldn't be any stupid questions ever. I recently was at Stanford in June. I was invited up there and I had an opportunity to actually give a toast. I thought I was going up there to teach, but it turned out I was giving a toast. They gave me 2 minutes. I told the guy who invited me, I said, it takes me 30 minutes to introduce myself. And you're giving me 2, right? So what I told him was it was a public speaking class. And it was a dinner they do at the end of every semester. And it's all put together and everybody has a role. Everybody has a speaking role and it's all of the students have a speaking role in the deal. So one's a host, one's an MC, all that kind of stuff. So he said that you have 2 minutes. You're giving a toast. You have 2 minutes. and you can't go over because it's a mortal sin. So I told him two things, because I try to leave value everywhere I go. I said, first of all, if you ever have stage fright, love the audience more than you love yourself, and stage fright goes away. Secondly, I'm going to suggest that you do something that I suggested my children do. And that is take out a blank, mine are 25 and 27 now, take out a blank word processor sheet and type in at the top, stay in curiosity, at the bottom, stay out of judgment, print it up and put it up in front of where you work, so that you're reminded every day that you need to be curious about who comes in and out of your life, and you need to not judge. And that includes questions. You need not judge people for what they're asking, but you shouldn't prejudge your question either. I call myself the king of the stupid question, because I don't prejudge questions. I just ask them. And see, now you're a victim of it. See there? Right?
I love it.
But that's literally, I totally agree with what you're saying, in that there's way too much judgment in this world. And what we need to do is we just need to be curious. If you're just curious about the people that come in and out of your life will be so rich, you won't recognize it. It's absolutely true. Okay. So the layman's version of how Bitcoin works. Thanks for letting me say that.
Of course. Your willingness as well to be courageous and ask something helps someone else
Oh,
who
absolutely.
isn't as courageous as you.
I
So
totally
always
agree with that.
there's somebody who wasn't willing to make themselves look stupid, but still wanted to know the answer to that.
So who did the best session ever on asking?
Who did the best session ever on asking? I don't
Look
know.
it up. Look it up. Jim Rohn.
Mm.
He is the man. He is absolutely the man. Anyway, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're great.
Tell us about how to mine Bitcoin.
So I'll give you the technical description, but first I'm going to give you an analogy.
Perfect.
Mining Bitcoin, gold is the best analogy that we have. And I think we have to teach with analogies when there's something that's so foreign to how we've navigated the world.
I agree with that.
Gold has value in part because it is scarce and it takes energy to, we're not going to say create, but refine, prospect, find, and turn into something that we use as a form of money. So the energy and the infrastructure and expenditure that it takes to create gold is part of why it's valuable. It's part of why it's hard to fake. And that is part of what gives it its monetary premium, its monetary value. So the same principle applies to Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining. The reason that Bitcoin has value, in a sense, is because it is scarce. It is hard to fake. You cannot send someone fake Bitcoin and it show up in their Bitcoin wallet. And it takes a ton of energy to create it, and it would take orders of magnitude more to try and fake it. Yeah. So the way that the Bitcoin mining process works, or the way that Bitcoin mining itself works, is that you take a raw resource, energy, that is refined into electricity that runs through a computer, a specialized computer that is just solving a particular algorithm that secures the Bitcoin network. And when you run that energy through that computer efficiently, you produce an end product, Bitcoin. And the more efficiently that you can do that, whether through computing prowess or the ability to source cheap energy, you effectively have what a gold miner has, which is a manufacturing and refining process. And the more efficiently and effectively you do that, the more effective you are as a Bitcoin miner. In a technical sense, what a miner is doing is securing the Bitcoin network itself. So I mentioned Visa earlier. Mm-hmm. A miner, in a sense, or the mining process, is a mix between what Visa does in validating and moving transactions and what the military does for shipping lanes, protecting things with a wall of energy that makes it very intimidating to attack. So miners are doing both of these things at the same time. They're refining energy into computing power that makes the Bitcoin network hard to attack. It's part of the reason that it's never been hacked and hasn't been critically, destroyed. And they're also moving value across that network. So Visa, military are the best analogies I have for what a miner's doing.
So the way the Bitcoin system works, if I'm understanding it correct, is you're literally rewarded for providing infrastructure.
Exactly.
So it's a way for Bitcoin to continue to live, right? To continue to build, to continue to sort of secure its existence.
We could spend hours just on the design of how Bitcoin is designed, but suffice it to say that yes, the miners are the infrastructure for why the network has security. And because those miners are in every part of the globe, there's millions of these machines running all across the world, many of them grid connected, many of them off grid, some of them running on Starlink, some of them running on short band radio. It's the most hard to attack network, the most secure, the most computing intensive network on Earth. So intense that if Amazon, Google, Meta, all of the largest computing companies in the world with all their data centers tried to attack the network, they would woefully fail. It is the most secure system that we've ever designed, and that's part of why it's such an important invention, and it's part of why it is forming the base layer of what I believe will be the global monetary network. And it starts out as just something that holds value, something like gold that you keep in a closet and appreciates, or at least doesn't lose value compared to everything else. And then it moves into these stages of usefulness where you actually use it as a medium of exchange. You actually use it to pay for things. Within the last couple of days, Square rolled out Bitcoin payments to all of their 4 million terminals. So anybody can buy anything now if you've got a Square terminal in Bitcoin. And then at some point, far down the line, probably within my lifetime, but at least decades out from now, people start to think of it as their unit of account. And that happens gradually, but it starts with first having enough integrity in the currency to hold value, to hold energy and economic energy, having enough usefulness to be a good transaction medium, and then having enough longevity or staying power and embedded use in people's day-to-day psychology that you start to think in terms of it rather than thinking in terms of dollars.
So how brilliant is it that the creator of Bitcoin created it?
That's a profound question. I mean, it builds on so many different innovations that came before it. People think it just kind of appeared out of nowhere. There was a lot that went into it before Satoshi Nakamoto ever entered the scene.
Yeah.
But the integrated system of the Bitcoin network, I think, is akin to the discovery of fire or the invention of the printing press. I mean, it is such a before and after moment in terms of how civilization will organize. We won't even see how profound it was until decades from now. And that's part of the challenge is it starts out very small, just a little flicker in cyberspace, someone releasing code that anybody can run. And now it's a multi-trillion dollar asset, but it's still less than 1% of global assets.
Yeah.
At the point that it starts being the bedrock of monetary policy and economic functioning for the largest economies in the world, then and only then will people understand how impactful it was.
Yeah.
And it will still have a lot of room to run from there.
Yeah, it's true. The future's bright. So abundantminds.com, abundantminds.com. If anybody is interested in looking at, like, you guys have probably different packages, right? For somebody who's looking to start smaller and potentially add and that kind of thing. Is that possible?
Of course. We have, you can get as little as one unit, which right now our lowest end units around $6,000. We have people with one, we have people with tens, we have people with hundreds. Soon here we'll have people getting up into the thousands because they keep on scaling their fleets. Yeah. But it really is just the most scalable modular investment that you could make. And it's very common. Just start with a little bit and get your familiarity. And then once you have a sense of safety around it, then you can scale up.
So you have 4 currently going, and you have 4 data centers currently going, and you have 2 more coming?
5 and then 2 more in construction.
Oh, 5,
right now.
Sorry. 5
Yep.
And then 2 more. That's wild. That's really cool. Beau Turner, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. It's been a lot of fun and super enlightening.
I appreciate you, Mike. It was really fun to be here. You're a great host.
Thanks, buddy. Can I ask you a question? Did you know that there's a technology that uses sound waves that'll tell your brain what to do? There literally is. It's called newcalm.com. It can tell your brain to heal, tell your brain to sleep, tell your brain to do all kinds of things. It can get you fired up. It can be a pre-workout. Newcalm.com. And the promo code is Mike15. Newcalm.com, promo code Mike15 for an extra 15% off. Go today.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at the Mike Litton Experience.